I quit my job. So Megan and I met, a few months later, and we met for a drink. And she said, you know what? Last night I had a dream about business, and the name of that business was Holos. Let's make it a product that's physical, that's in the hand. It's actually a craft product that creates lots of different types of jobs that can be on a shelf and communicate a clear message, and that's going to grow. One of those trends was, of course, kombucha. So I think we literally popped onto Amazon, bought a kit of stuff, and Megan started bringing a kitchen, and we started meeting on a weekly basis. It would not exist without that purpose, and the drink is a vehicle for that purpose. Kind of the origin of Holos actually started over in Cambodia on the streets of Phnom Penh. One night we went out, did some work on the streets. We met a woman, she had 5 children. She was being exploited to be able to survive over there. And we knew she wanted to find a way out. It needed to be a sustainable way of just moving away from that. As we worked with her, it became really clear that she had this other passion in her life, which was about doing nails. She loved doing nail varnish. Bought her a nail kit, and we set her up with a bit of work. And so it kind of seeded this dream really for Megan and I, which is how could we create a business that provides those kind of trauma-informed, supportive employment opportunities for people in the UK. So it left us with this dream, basically, of what could we do.
Today on The Tipple, I'm joined by Naomi Partridge, founder of Holos Kombucha. This is a brand built not just around a drink, but around the idea that what we can consume can connect us back to something much, much bigger. Holos comes from the word whole, and that sense of wholeness, people, planet, and purpose runs through everything that Naomi's building. In a world where purpose can sometimes feel like a bit of a buzzword, Naomi's been quietly building a business that tries to live it every single day. So, Naomi, welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us. It's just amazing to be on here, and what a lovely intro as well to Holos. So thank you for that.
So I've listed a little bit of what Holos is, but I suppose before we dive into anything more than that, we should probably start at the beginning. So I'm privileged to know quite a bit about Holos. Had the absolute pleasure of being on a Raising the Glass panel with you. For everyone listening, to me, Holos feels like a brand that started with intention rather than just producing a product. So what was the original spark that led to you bringing purpose and kombucha together?
Yeah. I mean, our story is totally wild, to be honest. Absolutely wild. And you're absolutely right. You know, it wouldn't exist without our sense of purpose. So kind of the origin of Holos actually started over in Cambodia on the streets of Phnom Penh. So I met my co-founder, Megan. So there's four co-founders, 2 couples, which is, again, another kind of interesting part of the story. But we met volunteering on the streets of Phnom Penh with women who've been exploited over there. And one night we went out, did some work on the streets. We met a woman, she had 5 children. She was being exploited kind of every night, basically, to be able to survive over there. And we knew she wanted to find a way out. It needed to be a sustainable way of just moving away from that situation and getting her kids into education. But it was how to do that. And as we worked with her, it became really clear that she had this other passion in her life, which was about doing nails. She loved doing nail varnish. And we got chatting with her. We bought her a nail kit, and we set her up with a bit of work. You know, it's just a really small example of an idea, which is actually as part of how someone might rebuild their life, how they might sustainably find freedom from exploitation, from trauma. There is a role for meaningful, curated, safe employment. So it kind of seeded this idea. And actually, whilst we were over there, we started to see her step into that kind of freedom. So through her community, through faith, through the employment opportunities, she actually got off the streets. Her kids got into education. She got into a safe space and built her life up. And so it kind of seeded this dream really for Megan and I, which is how could we create a business that provides those kind of trauma-informed, supportive employment opportunities for people in the UK? Because there are, estimated about 130,000 people in exploitation, right here in the UK.
Yeah.
A lot of people still see trafficking and exploitation as something that happens abroad. And obviously that is where the majority is happening, but there's still a lot on our doorstep. So it left us with this dream, basically, of what could we do? Megan stayed out there another 6 months, actually stayed in Cambodia, and worked out in the Philippines as well, doing similar kind of work. I came back totally fueled with this sense of calling. That's the only way I can describe it. I quit my job. so, so I was working in
Right.
a corporate space. I quit my job and spent 3 months there, just try it before I left, trying to kind of find opportunities to think, what can I do that uses the skills I have?
So,
And
so when
started
you
a,
quit your job, did
yeah.
you, at that point, you still didn't have the product idea?
Oh no. Oh no, this is what's crazy. I quit my job when I put on my kind of leaving note, as it were. I said, I'm leaving to set up employability opportunities for women who've been trafficked. That was as far as I got, and started with designing some workshops. Ended up leading a charity called the Sophie Hayes Foundation to provide those workshops. And those workshops are still running today. And I think they've met over 1,000 people. So the work we did there with others of creating
Mhm.
those has really made a difference. But I still longed to actually create a business and look at doing that. So Megan and I met, a few months later when she got back from her trip, and we met for a drink, and we just said, what about that business idea? And she said, you know what? Last night I had a dream about business, and the name of that business was Holos. And so we looked it up. We're like, oh, Holos
Wow.
means whole. That feels right. And then we said, okay, so if we're going to do something that creates, meaningful opportunities for people to work, let's make it a product that's physical, that's in the hand, on here, that's actually a craft product that creates lots of different types of jobs, that can be on a shelf and communicate a clear message, and that's going to grow. Something that's going to grow in the UK. What's a safe bet on something that's going to be a trend in the UK? And you got to remember, this was 2016. So
Yeah.
one of those trends was, of course, kombucha, and I'd tried it in the States. Megan had tried it in Cambodia, and it felt right. It's like, actually, let's just give this a go. So I think we literally popped onto Amazon, bought a kit of like stuff. Obviously, no kombucha kits existed at that time over here, but all the things. And Megan started bringing a kitchen, and we started meeting on a weekly basis and kind of mapping it out. What could this actually look like? And it went from there. So it would not exist without that purpose. And the drink is a vehicle for that purpose. That's where it began. So it's
It's,
crazy.
and it is. And it's really interesting because when you talk about it, um, even down to you had a dream for a brand name that you didn't even have a product underneath it. And you had to go and look up what the word meant, and then it fits what you're trying to do. But there's a lot of science in terms of the approach of what you did. What's the big bet? What's going to grow? Let's do something craft. Let's do. So there is all of this
Yeah.
real applied logic in what you're doing. But these big bursts of just risk taking, and although you've built it around a product,
Mm-hmm.
it could have been any product because you were so anchored to it. Just had to deliver the purpose. The best way I've heard you bring this to light when I've heard you talk about purpose in your business is your stick of rock analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is one of the ways you can tell, is purpose wash, or is it just a PowerPoint, or is it something that's living in a business? And I like to think of Holos, and this is my personal dream of our purpose, like a stick of rock. Anywhere you crack it open, you will see those same words. You'll see that same vision and mission. And for us, that can be framed as brewed for good. It's brewed for good for its wider purpose, supporting survivors of exploitation, trauma to rebuild their lives. But also, it's brewed for good because it tastes amazing. It's great for your gut health. So there is that anchoring piece there for us. And it's a challenge to us as founders to always be thinking in everything we do, is this brewed for good? Is this actually going to be rebuilding lives? Is this actually having the kind of positive impact that we want to have on the world? And that can hold us to account as well, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's, absolutely. And we, even from the start, in how we set up the business, and we were really fortunate. We had some great support from impact-led entrepreneurs when we started out. So we did an impact incubator. Actually, it's the very first bit of input we had for our business was a kind of 8-week incubator program. And right from the front, they were like, look, we want to challenge you. You want to make a difference in the lives of people. go so far beyond profit donation, right? We want to challenge you to how do you embed this in every part of what you do? So not only we decide from the start, we are going to, as soon as we can, create employment opportunities, and we did. So we started 2018. Our very first paid jobs went to survivors of exploitation and trauma. That's when we did our first pilot in
And that's
2019.
purpose in practice, right? That's
Yeah,
not
and
performative purpose. That's
absolutely
being true
not.
to what you're talking about.
And we can be real about that. There's been absolute pain points as well because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also when we set up the business, we set it up in our constitution. We're like, we want wherever this business goes, whatever it does, we want it to have a legacy and an impact in the sort of, I guess I call anti-slavery sector and supporting survivors. Obviously having had a bit of experience in leading a charity, I knew how hard it was for fundraising. I knew how difficult it was becoming. And so we basically gave away 25% of our founding shares to what has now become the Holos Foundation. So we are now part owned by that charity. And we've started to kind of just create this beautiful holistic synergy there. So we've got our cans and we launched these, 2p per can goes into that charity. That charity then gives grants to people who are on our program, our placement programs to pay for therapy. So there's this, and this is what gets me excited because I love the blueprint of purpose. And that's where I'm like, companies where it is just purpose on a, sat in marketing, purpose sat on a PowerPoint deck. It's
Values
missing
sat on a
out.
wall that nobody can remember the
Exactly.
fourth
Well,
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Missing out from the real possibility of business as a force for good. So yeah, I could go on about that for ages. I won't.
But I think what's really interesting is listeners will start to hear you constantly go next level. So the solution could very well have been everything you've described up to this point. This is what we want to do. We're going to create a product. We're going to back the areas that are growing. We're going to bring people into the workforce. That in itself is brilliant. That is purpose. And then you go a next level. You create the foundation. You create funds, and then you support people with therapy because it's the holistic picture of how people are able to be supported, not just by the functionality of a job, but seeing people as individuals and the ripple effect that has over more than that one individual, I suppose.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, these things are complex, they're nuanced, it's sensitive. It's unimaginable what people who've been through exploitation have been through. And it requires a full infrastructure that's very much, ultimately they are the heroes. Rebuilding your life after something like that, it's almost impossible to fathom how hard that would be. And so multiple interventions and opportunities are needed, and we're not unrealistic to say ours is, think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're right up the, having a job is quite, you need to feel safe, you need to have community, you need to have food, you need to have but having meaningful purpose in life or sense of belonging that can come from a job, that's something really critical as part of it. So we know that there's a part we play, and we're always asking, what other bits can we play that will be in service of the already amazing work being done by so many charities, different organizations. We're just a tiny piece of that puzzle, but I want us to be a well-informed, supportive piece that can make a meaningful contribution. And that's my real passion and hunger, really. I'm like, how do we do this really well? And we haven't always got it right. We haven't. But I want us to always have the mindset of trying to grow and improve and do things as well as we can.
So you are a hugely busy woman. You've got young children. You run this organization. You run it with your friend. There's, as you said earlier, two partners.
Yeah,
two sets of partners within it.
Kind of like two families, yeah, as the founders, yeah.
Dealing with, as you said, some, this is people who have gone through exploitation and trauma and tragedy. How do you create space for yourself? Because you need to have that space to show up. But how do you catch yourself when maybe you're going a little bit too deep into that space?
Empathy is critical, I think, in everything, right? In life, it's like, am I willing to step in? It's hard. It costs something, empathy as well, because it's like, I'm willing to lean into and kind of step into your world and imagine what it might really be in your shoes. So I think it's having the right balance of empathy, but also kind of helpful boundaries. But what's very interesting is when I've worked with the people who work with us, quite often because of where they've been, they have an unbelievable perspective, right? And actually,
Mm.
quite a great deal of hope, because they've overcome so much to get to this point, and they're now at a point of actually, I'm working. And what looks like us, like, oh gosh, it's quite cold out there today. It's a packing job, it's a factory. It's not super glamorous. It's it's
Yeah.
it's cold, or it's really hot, one or the other. But actually, hearing how they would describe the experience as this, it's autonomy, it's freedom. I'm earning money. I can spend that money how I want to. That there's actually real hope in that. So I think it's a degree of looking at where have people come from and where they are today. It's also, I guess, it's like all of us having helpful boundaries, as your situation, that working motherhood, that comes with a need for those that prioritization and sensing what's most important, being quite present in the moment as to what's needed now, and switching off parts of our brain in those moments. But I don't really have the answer. You probably hear I'm like, what's the answer to that question? I think I'm trying to find it out, because if I'm real, I think I have found it a heavy experience at points, and I want it to feel more joyful, because this is also our life and what we're building. And as a brand, we want to be purposeful but playful, because those two things can come together. And they probably represent how we are as a team. Actually, we do have a playfulness to us despite that heavy purpose. But personally, I think I'm still on that journey of trying to find that and not feel this sense of responsibility. But yeah, I think it's interesting because you see it a lot in the charity sector, that kind of feeling of duty, and there's so much more to be done.
Yeah. It's that, isn't it? It's no matter
Yeah,
what you've done,
there's
so,
more.
there's so many more women.
Yeah,
There's so many more examples. There's so
yeah,
much more.
yeah. And
You,
and and also, you also see none of us are the heroes here, and it's not down to one person. It's a team thing. And I think the more I can remember the team, remember the collective, and remember the stories of the women who've come through and have just been incredibly inspiring on that rebuilding journey, the more I feel hope rather than despair, and kind of possibility rather than, oh. Does that make sense?
it makes complete sense, but it's really interesting for me because the language you describe to use these women, the hope that it brings people, what they've done, the empathy that you lean in with, are probably all words that people would use to describe you. What?
Oh,
But it's true, because lots of people have had exactly the same experience that you've talked about volunteering. Lots of people have wanted to drive change. You've doubled down on that and done it, and you've done it in a way that is purposeful, and you use the word playful. I think it's perhaps that joyfulness that you're looking for, that, yeah, because I think you have to balance that dichotomy of some of where it's coming from with the joy that it's balancing out with. And you've done it in a way that is empathic, and you talk about it's taken a team, and it has, but it's also taken a moment in time. And you've said yourself, that there were times when you didn't get it right. There were times when it was hard. I think maybe Naomi needs to do a little bit of talking about herself or talking to herself, maybe, as others would talk about her.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's so interesting, is it? Because the truth is, once you start to dive into the world, once you start to open yourself out to what there is the need out there, what there is that's going on, even right now. Yeah, let's face it.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody's starting a sentence with me on the podcast, and even right now.
Particularly right now.
It wasn't going to get any worse.
It's just becoming more and more clear that not one person or one organization or one way of doing things is going to have the answer. And what? And that's where I'm like, I feel hopeful when I hear you describe, something I'm going to do is I'm going to shine a light on brands that are doing purpose in a different way. That gives me so much hope, because it's like, it's doing what each of us has within our gift. There's this phrase about purpose by this guy called Frederick Buchner, like a philosopher, ancient philosopher. I'm going to say he probably isn't now. Look it up in like a few years. But basically, it's kind of an old way of describing purpose, which is where your deep gladness meets the world's deepest needs. And I love that phrase, because I think it is like, what is it that I can actually do, put my hand to, the skills I've got, the way I am, right? My lifestyle, my constraints, my deep gladness, how my world's structured with the world's deep needs and where that intersection is. And I think, the more and more and more I'm seeing people just ask that question in very simple ways, in very small ways, actually. It's like, okay, what that looks like right now is deciding I'm not going to spend my money there and I'm going to spend it there. Or I'm not going to walk past that person that's on the street that's saying, they need some money. I'm going to go and get them a sandwich. It's like really small things sometimes, but it's like, what do I actually have to offer? And that gives me like a lot of hope, and also encourages us to just keep going. Sometimes I felt like we're not doing enough. I want us to do more. And then I'm like, we are doing what we can. And
maybe everybody else should do something.
And well, all of us can. All of us have something, right? Something that we can do, even if it feels small. It might be the biggest thing that's happened in that person's life.
We had A.D. Smith on a previous podcast, and he talked about the nod of acknowledgement. When you see somebody that's homeless or somebody with a disability in the street, he says everybody looks away because they're embarrassed or they do. And he said actually just that nod of acknowledgement, that smile, that hope can go a long way and cost absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
What you were talking about there, we were talking before, because I think a lot of people are using the word purpose at the moment. Some in absolutely the right way. And again, the Raising the Glass panel that you and Holos very kindly hosted and partnered and sponsored was absolutely about being purpose-led. And we talked a lot around how many people are starting to use the word purpose, but we also know that shoppers and consumers don't buy the word purpose, they buy what you're delivering. And the work there on that panel, the session with you, has led to Raising the Glass spotlight of pouring with purpose, which... And there's loads of initiatives out there. That there's like you talked earlier. How do you help people make choices? Buy Women Built is a great example.
Yes,
we're just helping you understand that this has got a logo on, and that means it was from a woman-founded business, and therefore maybe you might want to buy this product instead of this product.
Yeah,
and Pouring with Purpose is exactly that. It's just helping spotlight those brilliant drinks brands that are true to the reason behind why they were set up. But do you think as a drinks industry, we are moving towards more purpose-led? Do you think actually there's a risk because purpose is a bit of a buzzword? Or do you think we're just at the beginning and there's, as always, so much more to do?
Oh, I mean, all the above. I mean, I feel it's funny because on the one hand, I'm like, the more that business can be, even if it's profit donations, donating, the more it can be doing that, great. So on one level, I'm like, if as long as they're not just saying purpose and then nothing is happening, that's the really big problem.
Yeah.
If they're saying purpose, and what that means is actually from our profits, we're going to donate X percentage. Great. I mean, having sat on the other side on a charity kind of leadership role, I'm like, brilliant. Send more money into charity. I really believe, that's fantastic. I think it's kind of what's the missed opportunity of stopping there is the question. And I do understand the constraints of shareholders. I do get that, and the structures that are in place. But I think, if you look at kind of the original purpose of a lot of businesses, that philanthropic approach set up to help society, not just to make money. I love us to kind of more gradually, I think we are moving back to, and if it's led by consumers, fine. If it's the reality that consumers are interested in this and they want to see purpose-led, then that's great. It's holding up those kind of bigger organizations to account and saying, well, what therefore are you guys doing? But I feel like...
the next generation is, the younger generation are shopping much more purposefully.
Yes.
Before you've finished that thought on the third point, I just wanted to pick a little bit at that point around, you understand the complexity of shareholders. Because that's true. Lots of organizations are set up like that. So do you think that we can truly create this societal model that has been done in pockets when we still have this shareholder model, and it's the rich are getting rich, and because shareholders are extremely important, and they really can make a difference to a running of an organization. But actually, there's a real dichotomy again there of how much do you need to come back in your share price versus how much can be invested in doing what's right for the planet, for people.
Yeah. And I think the beautiful moment we're getting to is, again, because of that consumer-driven trend, it is getting to a point where my hope is starting to actually, you can't not do this because your brand, your business is going to suffer if you don't do this. And that's my hope, is we get to a world where it's actually in the minds of shareholders that are profit-driven, it's making absolute sense that we do this.
So if you don't want to do it morally, do it commercially.
Do it for whatever reason, to be honest. At this stage, ideally, it would be, yes, from a moral point of view, because we are all one at the end of the day. We can't steal from here and not expect it to have a consequence. And actually, as business leaders, we have a responsibility. I really do believe that, to look at how in our organizations, what's the impact we're really having. That is part of a leader's role today. It's not part of a ESG team or a marketing team. It's part of a leader's role. But I think it's lots of factors hopefully coming together. I mean, I love your point of view on this. What you're seeing, is it actually moving the dial in shareholders' minds? What do you think?
So I've had the benefit of working for a retailer that is owned by members. So you see a different lens than perhaps some of the competitive set. I agree with what you're saying. Consumers are demanding more purpose-led. They want to know where the products come from and what's in that product more than ever before. But they also want to know the impact to anybody who's been part of that through the supply chain. And so I think the brands that will succeed are the brands that understand that and are already operating that space and maybe dialing up what they're doing. But also, it's okay if you haven't been in that space. You can move into it for whatever reason that driver is. And as you said, you don't have to go, I'm going to set up this organization with purpose in from the beginning. Amazing if you do that because it's really true to your core. But if you're one of the huge companies, actually 1% of your profits really makes a difference. And that's probably a really good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm with you. I think there is hope for change. I think there is intent for change. I think helping educate people on what purpose really means. And I guess for me, my worry is the more people that move into purpose-led as a phrase stuck on a can, that when people scratch underneath doesn't really mean it. I don't want that to impact the true purpose-led missions that are out there. And I think that's the responsibility of everybody in the industry to be able to articulate that difference. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's how truth, it's being truthful. And I think, after our session, actually, I was left very reflective after that panel session, thinking like, what really is the difference? And having heard, I guess, from Tess from Tap Social, and from Half the Story. Rachel from Half the Story. And both of them, I was thinking, where does purpose sit in their organization? Neither of them does it sit in marketing. It sits in operations. And I think that's probably the easiest way to distill. Is this a real purpose blueprint, or is this a profit donation scheme? If you were to sit with their operations team, with people making actual daily decisions about the business, does the stated purpose in any way impact the way they do their job? And if it does, then you're probably talking more about a purpose blueprint. You're actually talking about a business that is designed in its financial modeling and in its structures for purpose.
But also just the way it operates. And that's what we talk about, but broader than that operation. So for me, they just are. It sounds really silly, but is it in marketing? Is it in how HR hire? Is it all three organizations were just purpose-led. Like when I think about Tess and the stories she talked about Tap Social, right the way through to naming one of the bits. So for anybody who doesn't know about Tap Social, they basically had a belief in being able to support people who had been in prison and very similar to your story. What do we need to do? We need to create a product
Mm-hmm.
Let's
Mm-hmm.
brew some beer that creates
Yeah.
jobs. And
Yeah.
one of their beers really helps people focus on how much time people in prison spend isolated. And I believe they actually named the beer Time Well Spent.
Mm-hmm.
And all of their pack designs are done by art groups that are set up
Yeah.
in prisons to
It's
help
amazing.
people learn, develop, get experience, and then therefore be supported and reduce reoffending rates and support rehabilitation. And there are so many examples from brands that I've seen when I've talked to purpose-led brands. HM Pasties, again, is an example of supporting rehabilitated offenders. I need a product. I can make Cornish pasties. That's
Yeah.
my business
Yeah.
model. And in all of the House of Sin, another example,
Yes.
working to address homelessness, using their student loans. And when they weren't at university and didn't get student loans, set up a business and they could make cinnamon buns, which are the best cinnamon buns ever. So all of these models for me have something, when you talk about that blueprint, that is the same,
Yeah.
which is exactly what you described at the beginning. I don't know what it looks like. I'm going to quit my job. I'm not saying everyone needs to quit, Joe. You might want to keep working while you figure out what it looks like. But such a drive to do something that is so authentic and impactful as an individual that you then find the model of whatever that might be underneath. And I think when you do it that way, that it again, we're using the phrase leading with purpose, but that is exactly what it is. Your purpose is foremost. The proposition sits behind it. It's still a really strong proposition. Your example of what's going to grow, what's the best bet.
Yeah.
The products of all of those examples I've talked about are fantastic products. There's no compromise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Every single one of that blueprint had that purpose-led element.
Yeah. And I think that's a distilling factor. It's like, what is the problem our business exists to solve? And if that problem is a social justice problem, then yes, you're a purpose-led business. And even more purpose embedded blueprint, however you describe it. It's like, and then, this is the thing. I'm like, my husband in particular, so there's the four co-founders, Tom, Joseph, Megan, and myself. Tom and Joseph, obsessed with making like the best tasting kombucha you could ever imagine in the world, and that's really important because we agreed up front, like, if we're really trying to solve this problem, we can't have a rubbish product.
No.
People will buy it once as a pity buy, and we've all done that, right? We bought something saying, oh, that's giving to charity, I'll buy that bit of jewelry or whatever, but we don't buy it again. Yeah, we bring it has to be like a repeat buy. So every part of this is crafted, that brewed for good message. And in some ways, and you look at all those businesses and how amazing, like the different organizations we just talked about, it's because it can't not be a great product, because otherwise it wouldn't deliver the mission. But what's the problem I'm here to solve? And I think the good thing is, businesses can look at, okay, I set up my business to solve a health problem or a problem with accessibility to a certain type of product which wasn't available for. But you can also now be thinking, I've had that level of success. What other problems are we in a position to be able to help solve now with the power we have, with the influence we have? So that's where I feel quite hopeful that it's never too late for this to evolve, right? And it's interesting to talk about how Tess has evolved, Tap Social, because we're always looking at innovation, not just in our products, but in our impact. And, we have brew kits that we make, kombucha brew kits, which are a fun part of our kind of business model. And so now we're actually piloting a program working with young men, actually, who've come from a background of being exploited, who are in social care, to have kind of basically Saturday jobs with us, building brew kits together in community. So it's a pilot of an innovative way of thinking, well, those people, when they get to 18, they're out. To linking it to the prison mission, 40% of people who are in prison are from a care background. So is there something as Holos tying in our mission, working with people who've been exploited, to do something there? So it's just that there's an innovative edge to purpose-led, I would say, that's not just trying to evolve the type of product you've got, it's evolving the way you're making it, the supply chain. And I do think a lot of drinks businesses are doing that across the supply chain. And I've been really encouraged to read more about that. In a number of the challenger brands, kind of who are we working with to pack our product? Can we work with a charity as part of that process? Yes, more of that. Yeah.
More of that right the way through the supply chain.
Yeah.
Naomi, if you fast forward 10 years, 20 years, and Holos has achieved everything that you hoped it would and more, what change would you most want to see because your brand existed?
I think there's a couple of different areas. So one, in the area of fighting exploitation and trauma, I would love, through the Holos Foundation, to have really made a really significant impact in that sector. So I'd really like to have seen that there's some kind of legacy that's informed by the sector as it stands then, because there'll be different needs then to what there are now. But that's just, whether it's pumped in loads of cash, whether it's setups, helpful structures, whatever that looks like. I would love the Holos Foundation to have left a huge blue footprint. And then I think it's more conversations like this. I'd love to be meeting with, loads of other drinks businesses, not just challengers, but, well established, and just actually talking about what can we collectively be doing? How can we be working together to have a really significant impact on the world? What's the power that's kind of within our hands, within our reach? And drinks is such a cool category. It's growing, it's evolving, it's innovative. It's, it's a massive opportunity, to really shape consumer culture, to help inform people about real world issues and how they can contribute to be a kind of a message out there to all the consumers that are engaging with us on a daily basis. There's more that you can be doing in your life to contribute, to make a difference in the world. So it's very broad and lofty, but I would love that. And I don't feel it needs to be from Holos. In fact, I think the opposite. Like, the more it's from everyone, better, I'd love us to be able to influence and challenge and say, hey, you can do this from the start, but it's not too late as well.
So finally, when someone raises a glass of Holos, who or what do you hope they're raising that glass to?
I feel like I need to pick up my Holos again. To every woman who's rebuilding. Let's see.
That feels like the perfect place to finish. Naomi, thank you for sharing not just the story of Holos, which is super, super important, but the thinking behind it, the intention behind it. Purpose-led businesses genuinely remind us that drinks can be more than something we consume. I mean, they can be great products and amazing and exciting, but they can also reflect the values that we all want to see in the world. So wherever you're listening from today, maybe this is your moment to pause, pour something you love, and reflect on the purpose behind what you're building too. She's been Naomi Partridge, I've been Rom, and that was The Tipple. Until next time.